Hi Booktube. Today I'd like to talk about comic books, a subject which I've been interested in since childhood, but in different ways over the years. So initially I was a fan of the Spider-Man films from Sam Raimi, and then the MCU from Iron Man all the way to Avengers Endgame, which was in 2019. That was really my MCU period, my Marvel Cinematic Universe. I watched a good chunk of those films as they were releasing in the cinema. That and the Spider-Man films where I fell in love with those characters. The X-Men films all the way up to Logan. The Batman films, all the many different renditions, be it Tim Burton, Christopher Nolan, the Lego Batman movie, which I think came out in 2017 or something like that. All these renditions of these characters. Even the video games, the Batman Arkham games, the more recent Spider-Man PlayStation games. I've loved this whole world. I've loved these characters, these stories, but for some reason I never picked up comic books and started to read them regularly until about a year or so ago with this Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. This isn't actually what I read from. I read it on my phone online, but I recently picked this up for a reread. This is widely considered the best Batman origin story. With comic books, it's really tough to determine where to start reading because some characters go back way, way back. You know, with DC, Batman, Superman, they go back into the 30s. For Marvel, it's more back into the 60s, but nevertheless, there's a lot of discussion. But this is really widely considered the best origin story, the most canonical origin story for Batman, at least in the relatively modern era. And it is really good. I loved it, but for some reason it didn't spark, a huge run of reading comic books. I read a little bit more after this, but anyway, nevertheless, this is really beautiful. You get pages like this, the neon underworld, where Batman starts learning to fight. This is his first year of being Batman. He meets Catwoman. He befriends Jim Gordon as Batman. Yeah, some great stuff here. Look at this. Anyways, if you know anything about comic books, you know this. You probably read it. If you don't, you might still know this. It's one of those iconic works. For me, Batman's probably my favorite superhero, even though he has no superpowers. From there, I went on to The Killing Joke, which I didn't really like that much. I've always thought of the Joker as more of a goofy character than what The Killing Joke shows, where he's just the worst ever villain you could really imagine in terms of the level of cruelty and sadism, and I don't mind having brutal violence in comic books. I'm not as far down that line as Steve is, where he doesn't like anything of that area being put into comic books. I wouldn't go that far, but I think how far they go in The Killing Joke is too much. The story seems silly as well. It wasn't for me. And I read The Long Halloween, the first couple of issues of it. I really enjoyed it, but for some reason I never continued. And during that period of having a small budding interest in comic books and reading comic books, I bought this, which I still haven't read. I've obviously seen the film though. It's one of the best MCU films. And I bought this just for some random reason because it came. I still haven't read it either. I know. I will eventually. But I got that Batman graphic novel because it came with this. A lot of this stuff I got on eBay for great deals. This, I'm sure you'll know, this is the hardcover deluxe edition. I, at the time, read the first issue, maybe the first two issues, and put it down because I was in the midst of a reading slump. Not because this wasn't enjoyable. Then I went back to it. A couple months later, tried to read the first issue, put it down because I was in a reading slump. Foreign to some of you, regular to some others. Anyways, about a month or so ago, I thought, why not pick this back up again? Why not? So I did. And it was amazing. Read it all the way through in about 3 days. And it was so much fun. At the back it says there's the most celebrated graphic novel of all time. It probably is. This is what it's like under the dust jacket. See the back here. There's so much to say here. I don't want to let any particular comic book or story take over this whole video because there's a lot to talk about. The artwork here is strikingly beautiful. I really don't know any other way to say it. This is one of my favorite panels here, one of my favorite couple of pages. That's from the first issue. This is the story of a group of superheroes who are being targeted or taken down one by one in the 80s. They're retired. They once were a sort of Avengers type team, but imagine if the Avengers took place in the world of Taxi Driver. You know, gritty, crime-filled, murder, assault, all sorts, you know. The type of stuff that Steve hates. But even if you do, and I can't say that's necessarily what I look for in a comic book, you still have to acknowledge that a lot of this is so much fun, and just how great some of this is. So one of the members of this old little superhero gang was killed, thrown out of a building, and Rorschach, who's probably the most memorable character for a lot of people, not necessarily my favourite from this story, but Rorschach here, who I just showed earlier, with this mask with the little Rorschach blots on his face. He, you know, decides to go and investigate things, and it starts a whole mystery. And through the different issues, we learn the origin stories, the different key characters, and then everything sort of comes together in the final third as this mystery unravels. And I think this was consistently great, but you get issues, in particular the two Dr. Manhattan issues, which were just out of this world amazing, some of the best things I've read, where you're going back and forth between time, revealing like these sort of tragic secrets about Dr. Manhattan. It's almost like the way Christopher Nolan ends his films. If you've seen Interstellar or The Prestige or Memento, you'll know that he loves to first show you something of the ending in the beginning of the film and then bring it back at the end in a way, you know, where your jaw drops and thinks, oh my god, that thing that I didn't notice, it's just come back now. Those Dr. Manhattan issues do that in an amazing way, where, I mean, I'm like visualizing almost if it was a film. I know there is a film and I haven't seen it yet, but just the way you cut between the past, the present, and it's just going back and forth in a beautiful way. So it's like a consistently really good story, and then it just spikes into near perfection for a few issues. There's so much to say here. As I said, I don't want to let any one thing take over the whole video. And also I do have a planned video for what I've read so far this year, including all books, not just comic books. So I'll leave some extra discussion for that video as well. My experience with Watchmen was so exciting, so much fun, that I thought, you know what, let's really continue with this time, not like it was before. So I went on with my favourite character and picked up these, which are the New 52 run. The first 2 volumes, at least, in these trade paperbacks. Written by Scott Snyder. This is one of DC's many reboots of their entire universe, which Marvel doesn't really do as much, or certainly not in the same way. DC does it all the time, which Steve rants about in all his epic Comic Book Wednesday videos, which he does with Michael K. Vaughan. Anyways, this is a new run on Batman, where it reinvents some of his origin story and maintains some of the things. So you have the Court of Owls and the City of Owls, which is, let's see, issues 1 to 7 here, and just issues 1 to 7 here, and then issues 8 to 12 here, and including the first annual. So this is a story about a cult that exists in the underworld of Gotham, which Batman isn't aware of, and it's coming to bite him now. Initially, he lives in denial, really. You know, this is my city. There's no way that an entire Illuminati-type organization could be running the whole city, and has been running the whole city for hundreds of years, just under my nose, and I never noticed and never saw them. And it's a mystery, as he is forced to deal with that fact, forced to uncover the mystery. There's some interesting artwork here. This is quite brutal, but at least this was one of my favourite actual moments. I think this is from the first issue, which was okay. This gets better as it goes on, I think, and peaks somewhere in the middle. You have Bruce here at some party, and he wants to leave, you know, and take on his mask and cowl, and it turns into this page. He says, "I need to get some air." So when you're reading it, it feels like a scene with motion. He opens the door and changes into Batman as you turn the page, which I thought was a lot of fun. I don't want to spoil things for you, but there's a lot of cool stuff here. Some of the Court of Owls stuff as it goes on. There's plenty of exciting action sequences, especially in the mid to late section where Batman's at his worst. And I really enjoyed it, but I can't say I thought it was the masterpiece that so many comic book fans think it is. And then I went on to the City of Owls, which had some really good issues, but on the whole, I found it a little underwhelming, not as good as the first volume, and on the whole, left me feeling a little less about this Scott Snyder run. And I didn't continue with it, and I don't know if I will. But still, there's some great pages here. This is one of the early fight scenes. Again, I really don't want to spoil things if you haven't read them, because, you know, some of this story is a lot of fun. This is one of the really cool pages. There's a lot to like here, but I thought that a lot of this felt empty. Still good, but certainly not great. And neither of these are masterpieces. You can fight me in the comments if you care enough. But good, not great, I think. Or maybe the first one is close to greatness at times, but the second volume of this run, not so much. And I moved on from there to Batman Hush, which had been something I'd wanted to read since my initial introduction to these comic books with Batman Year One. I heard this was a great story. It's a mystery involving someone from maybe Batman's past who's come back now for vengeance, for some sort of mission to defeat Batman. And it's also a romance with Catwoman, as you can see depicted in the back here. So this is much bigger than any of those two Scott Snyder books. In terms of page count, I think it's about 300 pages. And again, some beautiful artwork here. Even more than the Scott Snyder ones. Some great colour as well. This is with Poison Ivy. You have an evil Superman rendition here. He doesn't stay evil, he just, he's evil for a little bit. You get great pages like this, which is what is depicted on the back, and this is one of the covers for one of the issues. As much as I loved the artwork, I really didn't get into the story that much, apart from one or two issues which I thought had great suspense and great mystery. The rest of it I thought, yeah, you know what, this is pretty good, but nothing special. So again, I left feeling a little underwhelmed, and I think that's become a theme maybe with 21st century comics, but I don't want to cap myself from anything, and don't want to make any major generalizations just yet, because I'm still so early in this whole comic book fandom thing. But the artwork here is beautiful. I don't want to leave you with any doubts about that if you haven't read it. Now, somewhere during this journey, I discovered that just like I can read the novels and books that I enjoy on my Kindle or on an iPad, you can do the same with these comic books and save a lot of money. So this is The Long Halloween, which I really need to go back and actually fully read. In preparation for that whole full reading, I got some of the follow-up stories as well. On eBay again, I tend to find buyers who are listing a lot of different comic books and try and then negotiate for a bundle of them, save on shipping, save on the whole thing. And it gives me more options for things to read. So eBay really is the place to go, I think. These are the two follow-up stories which Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did. I think this one comes first, so this is the second in that series, but Batman Haunted Night, and then Batman Dark Victory. This feels really nice, actually. The cover has, I don't know what the texture is, but it feels great. And looks really interesting. So I'll be reading The Long Halloween, and then I'll follow it up with these two, whenever I get around to it. And amidst all that, the hauling, I did get a few other things. Batman the Black Mirror, I think it's called, which is another Scott Snyder story, but I think this is from before his New 52 run. I think this has Nightwing as Batman. And I got this iconic Frank Miller story, Dark Knight Returns, and its sequel, which I hear is not so good, but, I got them together anyway, so why not? I'll probably read them both. Now, during these past few weeks, I've been hearing a lot about Batman Nightfall, which is what a lot of The Dark Knight Rises was based on, the origin of Bane and the breaking of the Bat and all of that. So I thought I'd get into that world, and I'd heard that this was the place to start. This is Batman, the Sword of Azrael, which introduces this character, Azrael, who's like some weird like religious crusader, cult crusader almost. This was a 4-issue miniseries, and it was a lot of fun. Some of the artwork was really wonderful here. A lot of these colours, a lot of flames, because Azrael carries this flaming sword. This was simple. It wasn't anything incredible, but it was fun. And it set me up for the prelude to Nightfall, which is what I went on to. Just read the first issue that was included, which was the Vengeance of Bane story, which is the origins of Bane. Him growing up in this big pit of a prison, which you see in the film. And then he comes out and vows to take down Batman, which really seemed bizarre because Batman hadn't done anything to him, but that was his whole mission. And that sets up the prelude to Nightfall and the whole Nightfall story, which I've been reading here. I think this is the 2nd issue. So the 3rd in this whole graphic novel or book or whatever. I didn't really like the first of these issues. I enjoyed Vengeance of Bane, and I thought it was nice to see that origin story in book form. But the first issue of the Prelude to Nightfall I thought was boring. I was just waiting to see when it ends, and it was only 25 pages. I think when you're counting pages in something that short, you know that something's gone wrong. But I'll try and continue with it. I've heard, there are some mixed opinions about the whole Nightfall saga, but a lot of it, at least early on, is very positive, so I think I'll continue with it. Now, I hope I haven't bored the Marvel fans out there. I consider myself hugely amongst you, and I began my Marvel comic book journey with the Silver Surfer, who's a character that I've long been fascinated with, but never really explored in much depth. I still haven't seen those old Fantastic Four films which he's in, and the MCU never included him. I'm sure it was a rights issue. Maybe Sony had him as a character and they couldn't share him over or something annoying like that. But I really do wish, after reading this epic collection, which is the Silver Surfer Thanos Quest, that he was included, but it's a shame he wasn't. So this was my introduction not only to the Silver Surfer, and not only to Marvel comic books, but also to these epic collections, which I've become a huge fan of. This is what Steve Donahue and Michael K. Vaughan started their little comic book video series about. Michael K. Vaughan has a huge collection of these epic collections, which are reprint series, which include a run on a certain character or a certain story. So a run is essentially a period in a comic book where, let's say you have the Silver Surfer, for example. It's been going along. You've had the initial run with Stan Lee, and then have different other writers and artists taking over. And at some point, a particular writer and a particular artist come on to the book. Sometimes they're the same person, doing the writing and the art. Sometimes they're different, but they come on, they have a synergy, and they go on a run. Could last 2 years, could last 1.5 years, could last 3 years. And these epic collections try and capture those runs, so you can read that period. Now, I do have some other epic collections like that, which I'll show you, but this is a little different. This is less of a writer-artist-driven run, and more of a story-driven collection about Thanos, and this is what leads into what you see in the Infinity War film, and what you see in the Infinity Gauntlet Omnibus, which I'll get onto. So this starts out with the Silver Surfer coming to Earth and telling Captain America that he has killed Thanos, which we know isn't true, but we'll find out soon. He tells Captain America, "I've killed Thanos, he's no longer a threat to you." Cap is, he doesn't fully, he's not fully convinced, but, he takes him in his word. And we go on a few Silver Surfer adventures. Okay? Different stories with the Silver Surfer as he travels the cosmic spaceways. Goes on saving different people, different planets, and having different moral dilemmas. I think the first issue was really interesting in how it ended. So he comes to see Captain America, wants to leave, and some weird monster has taken over on Earth, and it's growing in size. You can see it here. This is its initial form, and then it starts to grow and just grow larger and larger. You can see it. until it becomes a huge menace that the Silver Surfer has to deal with, and he does that wonderfully. Eventually he decides, to take him up into space to fully defeat him, so the damage on Earth wouldn't be catastrophic. But when he reaches there to this, I don't know if he takes him to the moon or to some other planet, he discovers that this monster is actually a person, and there is a person still within him. And now he has this weird dilemma. So he says the Silver Surfer can't kill a person. It's not in my nature. So he decides to leave this monster there on the planet, who wants to be killed, who wants to be spared, I think, the pain and also the potential of hurting others. I don't know if there is still a potential because he's trapped there, but still. And the Silver Surfer says no and leaves him there, and he has this little moral dilemma about it. Not sure if that was the right thing to do, but that's who the Silver Surfer is. A guy with a lot of philosophical, moral dilemmas in every issue. But I think he doesn't go so far as to be dude bro. I think it just stops at that barrier, so it's a lot of fun and isn't marred by dude broness. And this continues on into with different Silver Surfer issues, and then it gets really exciting with the Dynamo City arc, which is a four issue little arc where the Silver Surfer crashes in this little bubble city in space, and it zaps him of his powers. It takes his powers, absorbs it, and uses those powers to power the city. And now he's a normal citizen in this sort of satirical capitalist society, and he struggles to get out, and he has to find a job and find all these things. I think part of what made it so funny is the fact that the Silver Surfer gets into different conflicts with people who sometimes try and zap his powers, but he laughs at them. He mocks them and says, oh, well, mine is the power cosmic. You may think, you can take someone's solar power, someone's magic power, but mine is the power cosmic. And then he defeats them. But this one was different. He lost everything and had to come back. And all that is to set up the character for his encounters with Thanos. And so we get the Thanos quest here, which has nothing really to do with Silver Surfer initially. It's about 100 pages on Thanos' journey to find the Infinity Stones, and here they're called Infinity Gems. In the films they're called Stones. And it's a lot of fun. You see, I think, a slightly different side to Thanos than you do in the MCU films. Here he's less using brute force and more deceiving every single one of his opponents. And it's across this 100 pages where he gathers the Infinity Gems and, builds his gauntlet. And then we come into a few follow-up issues, which we go back to the Silver Surfer. We see him discover that Thanos is now alive and super powerful, and he tries to deal with him, fails, and decides he has to go to Earth to warn the Avengers and everyone else that he knows on Earth, all those superheroes. And that's where this wonderful epic collection ends, and that story picks up in the Infinity Gauntlet series, which I then went on to. So it has this famous cover here, which if you're a comic book fan, you've definitely seen this, you're definitely aware of this. And this is what a lot of the Infinity films, that whole saga in the MCU, are based on. There are a lot of differences here so far that I've seen. This omnibus, so this is one of those big 1,000-page hardcover omnis, but I got it as a digital version. So this includes some of the Silver Surfer issues before this epic collection, then includes basically all the contents of this epic collection, or most of them are included. The Thanos quest and some of those following issues, and then picks up where that epic collection left off with the Infinity Gauntlet series, which is what I've been reading. I think I'm on the 3rd issue now, and in the films, if you watch Infinity War, you'll see that Hulk crashes down onto Earth and warns Doctor Strange that Thanos is coming. In here, the Silver Surfer crashes down. You'll see this page, which is depicted wonderfully in the beginning of the Infinity War film. That's the Silver Surfer. Actually, if I put it here, maybe. The Silver Surfer crashing into Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, and he warns him and what's his friend's name again? Wong. He warns the both of them that Thanos is coming, and that sets off the whole thing. And Thanos does the snap, and then we deal with the consequences. So that's where I've got to in that whole story. And in reading these Silver Surfer stories, it built up this interest in me to go back to the beginning, to the initial Stan Lee run, which is still hailed as the best run on this character. So started reading this Marvel Masterworks. This is the first volume, which has like the first 7, Now, the first 6 issues, and I've read the first 4 of them, these were double-length issues, so they're about 40 pages each, and they are Silver Surfer adventures. Initially here, at least so far where I am, the Surfer is trapped on Earth, punished by Galactus, who was his former master, who really created him. He was a normal man called Norrin Radd on some alien planet, which was invaded by Galactus, who is a supervillain, but not the most villainous of supervillains in his personality. He's this sort of ancient being who needs to devour the essence of planets to stay alive. And it so happens that Norrin Radd's planet was picked this time, and he has to eat it and take it up, and he's constantly hungry, and that's what he has to do. Galactus does what Galactus must to survive. He doesn't really want to hurt all these people, but that, he has to. And Norrin Radd decides to go up, make a deal with him to spare his planet's life, and he says, I'll become your herald. I'll go out, search for planets for you to devour, planets that hopefully are lifeless, if you save my own planet. And he does. Later, Silver Surfer betrays him. Those are in the Fantastic Four issues, which I haven't got to yet. And he is earthbound for a while. But, Stan Lee finds a way to take him out. For example, Loki uses magic to take him to Asgard for a whole issue, which was a great issue, and stuff like that. This is brilliant stuff, and I'm excited to go on with this run. And now we've got to the best thing that I've read in my early comic book journey, which I'm still going through. I'm about 700 pages into this omnibus, and that's The Mighty Thor by Walter Simonson. This is massive, super heavy. I'll show you some of the artwork, but really, it's breaking my back just holding it, like Bane cracking Batman. It's very heavy. It's like 1,200 pages, and it collects this whole run that Walt Simonson had on this book in the 1980s. Now, I've always loved Thor in the MCU films, but I didn't think that was a character that I was going to read near the beginning of my comic book journey. I thought this was my first omnibus that I bought, and I thought that if I was going to get an omnibus, it would be a Spider-Man one, probably, because he's my favourite Marvel character. Maybe the X-Men, because that's my favourite Marvel team. But no, this seemed to be the one. It was pulling to me. Steve Donahue mentioned it as his favourite Marvel omnibus. Everything I've heard about it was amazing, so I thought, had to try it. And how great it was that I made that decision, because this is amazing. This just has, 5-star after 5-star after 5-star issue. This is at least initially, maybe the first few hundred pages, the story of a certain fire demon who is crafting some massive sword, and we slowly learn of his intentions to, destroy the world. We see at the end or the beginning of every issue a panel like this, or a page like this. Sorry, it's tough to hold this up, but as he's, sorry. As he's hammering away at his anvil building this sword, and it's building this suspense slowly. And as each issue goes on, we get a little more information about who this is, what they're doing, and how that's going to, affect the world. But in the meanwhile, we're getting Thor stories. This introduces us to one of the great Thor side characters, Beta Ray Bill, who I've come to like, maybe even more than Thor. He is amazing. I'm going to do a whole video when I finish this omnibus, so I don't want to take too much time. I think I've already taken way too much time. But Beta Ray Bill is this alien who attacks Thor. Turns out it was just a misunderstanding. But amidst that misunderstanding, he wields Thor's hammer, who, if you know anything about Thor, you know that only he can carry because he's worthy. Only the worthy can wield Mjolnir, his special hammer, which is the little curse or magic that Odin's put on it. Right? This is, whosoever shall he be worthy can wield the hammer and have the power of Thor. And Beta Ray Bill does, and he becomes Beta Ray Thor. And as the story goes on, he becomes almost Thor's best friend, and like a sidekick in lots of stories. He's really what made me fall in love with this omnibus, with this run. And then from there was so much. Balder the Brave and his miniseries that's included here, another amazing character. Karnilla, Queen of the Norns, Odin, Loki, Sif, Lorelei, so many amazing characters. My iPad with my little list of comic books that I've read has just died, so can you just give me a minute? But yeah, Thor, amazing. The actual physical edition of this is beautiful. The artwork underneath the dust jacket. I don't want to show major spoilers, but I mean, look at this. Look at this. This is the best of the comic books that I've read. And it's one of the best things I've read. I've had so much fun with it. It's so epic. It's so cool. Has such an array of various different characters. An amazing set of stories and different arcs. It's everything you could want from a comic book. Everything else I've shown, even the best stuff, almost pales in comparison to this. This is, the peak. Now, I mentioned earlier that Spider-Man was my favourite Marvel character, so of course I had to go out and buy some Marvel Spider-Man superhero comics. Sorry, that sounds silly. But yeah, this epic collection, Spider-Man No More. This is the beginning of the Stan Lee John Romita run. John Romita Sr., by the way. It's got issues 39 to 52. I just read the first 2 issues a week ago, which are Green Goblin issues. Funnily enough, right at the beginning of this run, the Green Goblin is basically defeated and unmasked, and just, that's it. The start of this run, the great Spider-Man villain is no more. Anyways, I heard Steve in a video on this epic collection mention how bad the cover choice is here, and I couldn't agree more, because he showed the cover, and you'll see it here, of the actual comic book issue called Spider-Man No More, which this epic collection is named after. This is the iconic cover for the Spider-Man No More issue, and sadly they just picked this, maybe because it sells with all the Avengers characters on it. I don't know, but yeah. So I'm excited to continue with this. It's a major change of pace from some of the more modern comic books. But then again, I loved the Silver Surfer from Stan Lee, and I loved the early 2 issues that I read here. You can see they're a lot wordier. That's what the 60s and early 70s were like for comic books, but it's a lot of fun still. So I'm here at the beginning of this Rhino story. That's my little Dali bookmark, which I got from my previous trip to the MoMA in New York. And I'll continue on with this. And that epic collection was actually purchased as part of a bundle on eBay, which I negotiated a price for. And I got it along with this, which is The Goblin's Last Stand. So this one looks exciting. This is still Stan Lee, still John Romita, but you have Conway and Kane in this as well. This is issues 105 to 123. Then probably the book I've been most excited to read, and that's Kraven's Last Hunt, which I got interested in from the Spider-Man 2 PlayStation game, where Kraven is a key villain, and the black suit and Venom and that stuff plays a key part in the game. So I picked this up, which is widely considered one of the best Spider-Man epic collections, so I'm excited to read this one as well. And I might report on these individually as I go through them, if I feel like I have a lot to say. And the most modern of those Spider-Man epic collections that I got was this, Return of the Sinister Six, which is obviously Spider-Man's famous Rogues Gallery. This is from the early 90s, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issues 334 to 350, so you can see how far we've moved across these epic collections. Oh, and I also won a bid for this. The first Avengers run. This is issues 1 to 20. I was excited when I won the bid, and then I saw Steve bashing this, so now I'm less excited to read it, but I'll still read it anyway. This is the origin of the Avengers. That's the Hulk. I think that's Iron Man up there. These are the first stories, so yeah, why not read them? And my experience with Thor so far made me really fall in love with Omnis. Even though they're unwieldy and super heavy, had to go and get another one. And this is Ultimate Spider-Man. I am now on issue 19, I think, so I've read the first 18 issues. I think this is about 40 issues long, so I'm nearing halfway, about 400 something pages into this. And it's a lot of fun. I think it started out... Sorry, I need to put this down because it's so heavy. Less heavy than the Thor one, but still. This is the Brian Michael Bendis run from the year 2000, which uses a digital artwork, which is obviously different to any of the other Spider-Man stuff that you might know. Anyways, initially it was okay-ish, a bit of fun, but as it developed and as some of the new Spider-Man rogues were introduced, you got Kingpin and Doc Ock and whatnot, and the story developed, I found it a lot more interesting. And one thing that I really noted here is that Mary Jane discovers, or is told by Spider-Man, about his true identity. Peter Parker tells Mary Jane really early on that I'm Spider-Man. And it's a different dynamic. It's one that you barely see in comic books. You basically never see in any of the Spider-Man renditions until a while after being Spider-Man. So here, Peter Parker doesn't deal with any of those issues. Do I tell MJ? Do I not? Do I put her in danger, etc.? He doesn't deal with that. He just tells her straight away, which I thought was interesting. Here's the Kingpin here in all his glory. You can see these are way less wordy than the Spider-Man No More Epic Collection, for example. So that's what about 35 years of comic book evolution does for this particular character. This is, outside of the Amazing Spider-Man. So this isn't the Amazing Spider-Man. This is like a different name for Spider-Man, a different run and story. So they can do a lot of different things and change around aspects that the canon and the Amazing Spider-Man wouldn't do. So they can experiment and have fun. And it's been a lot of fun so far. And then one day I thought, why not read Sandman? Because outside of Watchmen, the Neil Gaiman Sandman run is probably the most critically acclaimed comic book run. The one that the snobs might include in a best books list. They might include Watchmen, the Sandman, or at least one of the issues or volumes or something, and nothing else in comic books. Of course, all the famous superheroes are beneath them. So I went on eBay for a cheaper price, and not to support Neil Gaiman financially, and got the first 3 deluxe editions of the Sandman. They are beautiful hardcovers like this. They're not super heavy because how many issues do they include? It says it somewhere. Got the first 16 issues. So, a big omnibus has 45 issues. This has about 16. And I read the first 2. The first one's a double-length issue, which often happens with the start of a character. And it was quite a bit of fun, so I'm definitely going to continue with this. Obviously, with some of these I've only started because I'm still early in the comic book journey. I've been reading these, a little over a month. So, of course, they're not all completed or anything, but, I still buy. It's got, under the dust jacket, it's got the same artwork. So, there's nothing new to show you like there was with the Thor omnibus. So, I'm just going to keep them on. I have this, which has issues 1 to 17, I think. And I have the next 2 deluxe editions, which I'll show you in a moment. And this has some beautiful artwork as well. Look at this. Pages like these. Amazing stuff, really. I think the most beautiful piece of art that I've seen in this so far is this page here, where the Sandman escapes his entrapment. So I don't want to talk about him too much because I'm so early into this. I watched the first episode of the Netflix show, which was fun. The Netflix show was goofy, not that great, but it was fun just to watch it along with the first issue because it mirrors it very, very similarly. It's very different to any of the other comic books here. It isn't really about normal superheroes. It's about this, the Lord of Dreams, someone who controls the dream world, the sleeping world. So it's going to go in a whole different direction and have a whole different vibe than anything else that I'm reading. So it's nice to have that as a change. So that's book 1. This is book 2. And this is book 3, which is still sealed. But I got these all off the same person on eBay. I think there are volumes 4 and 5 of this deluxe edition. And then there's a couple follow-ups, prequels, sequels, stuff that aren't part of the main story. I think there's 75 issues in the main Sandman run from Neil Gaiman. So I'm excited to continue reading on. I might continue with the show. It wasn't amazing, so I don't know, but we'll see. And I mentioned earlier that the X-Men were my favourite superhero team, at least so far in my journey through the films. So I thought, why not start with the Uncanny X-Men, Volume 1. This is the omnibus. And I just read the Giant Size X-Men issue 1, which is the first issue of this new X-Men reboot. So I think the X-Men initially came out maybe in the 60s, potentially a little earlier, I don't know, but probably the 60s. And wasn't received particularly well, didn't sell that well, and isn't even now considered that great. And, some years later they rebooted it with the Chris Claremont run. So Giant Size X-Men 1 starts with, sorry, iPad switched off. With Professor X trying to recruit a new X-Men group. Professor X shows up in Germany for his first recruit. Then he goes to see Wolverine, and so on and so forth. I think that was a double-size issue as well. I haven't read on, but I will continue with this. There's a lot for me to continue, but I think there's a good amount that I've already read and discussed in this video. If Steve is watching this, I know he's growling at the screen at a certain omission, the greatest superhero that he would say. Sorry, and the TV is just over there, and on it is paused an episode of Smallville. I'm now halfway through season 3, and that's been my real introduction to Superman. Outside of those silly DCEU films that Zack Snyder tried to do with the Justice League and all that stuff, and Batman vs Superman, which I hated. This is my real introduction to Superman, and I think I've really fallen in love with Superman and Clark Kent. So I think from Smallville I'm going to go on and read other Superman stories. I've heard a lot of talk about this, Superman for All Seasons, which I intend to read. And this famous Alan Moore story, Superman the Man of Tomorrow, or actually Superman Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. So I'm really grateful to Smallville for introducing me really to Superman, the lore of which, I knew a good amount, but really knowing Clark Kent, his family. Smallville is mostly Superboy. So Clark Kent living in Smallville with his parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent, and his high school life and things like that before he wears the costume and moves to Metropolis and all that. And the show's been wonderful. It's, it sort of switches from Monster of the Week episodes to some really, really wonderful episodes that dive into the depths of certain characters in the show, be it Lex Luthor or Lana Lang or Clark Kent or his parents or something like that. Especially have loved the episodes which, delve into his own backstory more, his origins from Krypton. We're in a similar situation to Clark in wanting to know more about his past, to know more about Jor-El, and all that time on Krypton. So those are some of my favorite episodes. It's been wonderful. Going into this comic book reading journey, I've gone back and rewatched the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. I went back for the first time in years, I think maybe since their release, and rewatched Infinity War and Endgame, which is probably the pinnacle of the MCU, maybe, barring Iron Man, the first Iron Man film, which is one of my favorites. They really were a lot of fun. I just wish the Silver Surfer was a part of those films. And I went back and rewatched the Dark Knight trilogy, which I already do pretty regularly anyway. I rewatched the X-Men films, which I hadn't seen in about 8 years, and rediscovered my love for Days of Future Past, which I think is one of maybe the 5 best superhero films of all time. I rewatched Across the Spider-Verse, which is very new, and is one of my favorite films of recent years. I think one of the best of this century. I don't know how many superhero films I would include in the best of this century, but that would definitely be amongst them. I think this should be the end of the video. I've taken a lot of your time. I've taken a lot of my energy because I'm ill, which is why I hadn't made a video in a few days. My voice has probably been very nasally during the video. I apologize for that. But yeah, I spoke about all the comic books that I've been reading over the past 5 weeks or so, what I'm going to continue reading. I've really fallen in love with this whole topic. I spent a lot of money. I don't think I want to continue spending at the same rate or anywhere near that. I think now that I've discovered, the same way I did with normal books, that digital is an incredibly viable option, and a really easy option, and a much cheaper option, that I think I'm going to go with that, and then maybe only buy the physical editions that I really love, or if I find some great deal on an Epic Collection on eBay or something like that. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to Steve Donahue and Michael K. Vaughan for all the Epic Comic Book Wednesday videos, which I've been watching for a long time, and finally decided, you know what, I should read some of this stuff. Thank you. I'll be back.